We're going to continue with City of Ember, and we're on Chapter 7, A Message Full of Holes. It was the printing that sparked Lena's curiosity. It was not handwriting, or if it was the neatest, most regular handwriting she had ever seen. It was more like the letters printed on cans of food, or along the sides of pencils. Something other than a hand had written those words. A machine of some kind. This was the writing of the builders, and so this piece of paper must have come from the builders too. Lena gathered up the scraps of paper from the floor and gently pried open Poppy's fists and mouth to extract the crumbled wads. She put all this into the dented box and carried it to her room. That evening, Granny and the baby were both asleep by a little after 8. Lena had nearly an hour to examine her discovery. She took the scraps from the box and spread them out on the table in her bedroom. The paper was thick. At each torn edge was a fringe of tangled fibers. There were so many little pieces and one big piece with so many holes that it was like lace. The chewed bits were beyond saving. They were almost a paste. But Lena spread out a big, lacy piece and saw that on one edge of it, which was still intact, was a column of numbers. She collected all the dry scraps and puzzled over them for a long time, trying to figure out where they fit into the larger piece. When she had arranged them as well as she could, this is what she had. All of this is going to be on your slides on Google Classroom today, so you can take a peek at it. Lena could make sense of only a few words here and there. Even so, something was about this tattered document was exciting. It was not like anything Lena had ever seen. She stared at the very first word at the top of the page, Instru, and she suddenly knew what it must be. She'd seen it often enough at school. It had to be the beginning of instructions. Her heart began knocking against her chest like a fist at a door. She had found something. She had found something strange and important. Instructions for something, but for what? And how terrible that Poppy had found it first and ruined it. It occurred to Lena that this might be what her grandmother had been talking about for so long. Perhaps this was the thing that was lost. But of course, not knowing what had been lost, Granny wouldn't have recognized the box when she saw it. She would have tossed it out of the closet just as carelessly as she tossed everything else. Anyhow, it didn't matter whether this was the thing or not the thing. It was a mystery in itself, whatever it was, and Lena was determined to solve it. The first step was to stick the scraps of paper down. They were so light that a breath could scatter them. She had a little bit of glue left from an old bottle. Painstakingly, she put a dot of glue on each of the scraps and pressed each one into its place on one of her precious few remaining whole sheets of paper. She put another piece of paper on top of this and set the box on top to flatten everything down. Just as she finished, the lights went out. She'd forgotten to keep an eye on the clock on her windowsill. She had to undress and get in bed in the dark. She was too excited to sleep much that night. Her mind whirled around, trying to think what the message she'd found might be. She felt sure it had been something to do with saving the city. What if these instructions were for fixing the electricity or for making a movable light? That would change everything. When the lights went on in the morning, she had a few minutes before Poppy wakened to work at the puzzle. But there were so many words missing. How could she ever make sense of such a jumble? As she pulled on her red jacket and tied the frayed and knotted laces of her shoes, she thought about it. If the paper was important, she shouldn't keep it to herself. But who could she tell? Maybe the messenger captain? She would know things like official documents. Captain Fleary, Lena said when she got to work, would you have time to come home with me later on today, just for a minute? I found something I'd like to show you. Found what? Asked Captain Fleary. Some paper with writing on it. I think it might be important. Captain Fleary raised her skinny eyebrows. What do you mean, important? Well, I'm not sure. Maybe it isn't, but would you look at it anyways? So that evening, Captain Fleary came home with Lena and peered at the bits of paper. She bent down and inspected the writing. Foal, she said. Axe, rem, aunt, what kind of words are those? I don't know, said Lena. The words are all broken up because Poppy chewed on them. I see, said Captain Fleary. She poked at the paper. This looks like instructions for something, she said. A recipe, I suppose? Small steel pan, that would be what you used to cook it with. But who would have such small, perfect writing? That's the way they wrote in the old days, said Captain Fleury. It could be a very old recipe. But then why would it have been kept in this beautiful box? She showed the box to Captain Fleury. I think it was locked up in here for some reason, and you wouldn't lock up something unless it was important. But Captain Fleury didn't seem to have heard her. Or, she said, it could be a school exercise, someone's homework that never got turned in. But have you ever seen paper like this? Doesn't it look as if it came from someplace else? Not here? Captain Fleury straightened up. A look of puzzlement came over her face. There is nowhere but here, she said. She put both of her hands on Lena's shoulders. You, my dear, are letting your imagination run away with you. Are you overtired, Lena? Are you anxious? I could put you on short days for a while. No, said Lena. I'm fine, I am, but I don't know what to do about it. She gestured towards the paper. Never mind, said Captain Fleury. Don't think about it. Throw it away. You're worrying too much. I know, we all are. There's so much to worry about, but we mustn't let it unsettle us. She gave Lena a long look. Her eyes were the color of dishwater. Help is coming, she said. Help? Yes, coming to save us. Who is? Captain Fleury bent down and lowered her voice, as if telling a secret. Who built our city, dear? The builders, said Lena. That's right, and the builders will come again and show us the way. They will? Very soon, said Captain Fleury. How do you know? Captain Fleury straightened up again and clapped a hand over her heart. I know it here, she said, and I have seen it in a dream. So have all of us, all the believers. So that's what they believe, Lena thought, and Captain Fleury is one of them. She wondered how the captain could feel so sure about it, just because she'd seen it in a dream. Maybe it was the same for her as the sparkling city was for Lena. She wanted it to be true. The captain's face lit up. I know what you must do, dear. Come to one of our meetings. It would lift your heart. We sing. Oh, said Lena, thank you, but I'm not sure maybe sometime. She tried to be polite, but she knew she wouldn't go. She didn't want to stand around waiting for the builders. She had other things to do. Captain Fleury patted her arm. No pressure, dear, she said. If you change your mind, let me know, but take my advice. Forget about your little puzzle project. Lie down and take a nap. Clears the mind. Her narrow face beamed kindness down at Lena. You take off tomorrow, she said. She raised a hand goodbye and went down the stairs. Lena took advantage of her day off to go to the supply depot to see Lizzie Biscoe. Lizzie was quick and smart. She might have some good ideas. At the supply depot, crowds of shopkeepers stood in long, disorderly lines that stretched out the door. They pushed and jostled and snapped impatiently at each other. Lena joined them, but they seemed so frantic that they frightened her a little. They must be very sure now that the supplies are running out, she thought, and they're determined to get what they can before it's too late. When she got close to the head of the line, she heard the same conversation several times. Sorry, the clerk would say when the shopkeeper asked for 10 packets of sewing needles, or a dozen drinking glasses, or 20 packages of light bulbs. There's a severe shortage of that item. You can only have one, or else, the clerk would say. Sorry, we're out of that entirely. Forever? Forever. Lena knew that it hadn't always been this way. When Ember was a young city, the storerooms were full. They held everything the citizens could want. So much it seemed the supplies would never run out. Lena's grandmother had told her that school children were given a tour of the storerooms as part of their education. They took an elevator from the street level to a long, curving tunnel with doors on both sides of the other tunnels branching off of it. The guide led the tour down the long passages, opening one door after another. This area, he would say, is canned goods. Next we come to school supplies. Around this bend we have kitchenware. Next come carpentry tools. At each door the children crowded against each other to see. Every room has something different, Granny told Lena. Boxes of toothpaste in one room, bottles of cooking oil, bars of soap, boxes of pills. There were 20 rooms just for vitamin pills. One room was stacked with hundreds of cans of fruit. There was something called pineapple. I remember that one especially. What was pineapple? Asked Lena. It was yellow and sweet, said Granny with a dreamy look in her eye. I had it 4 times before we ran out of it. But these tours had been discontinued long before Lena was born. The storerooms, people said, were no longer a pleasure to look at. Their dusty shelves stood mostly empty now. It was rumored that in some rooms nothing was left at all. A child seeing the rooms where powdered milk had been stored, or the rooms that stored bandages or socks or pins or notebooks, or, most of all, the dozens of rooms that had once held thousands of light bulbs, would not feel, as earlier generations of children had, that Ember was endlessly rich. Today's children, if they were to tour the storerooms, would feel afraid. And that's where we're going to pause today.